The time is here for the infamous tribe swap on season 48 of Survivor. It's time to break down episode 4. Okay, before we get to the tribe swap, we have to talk about post-tribal. This was interesting. So recap, this was the crazy tribal where it came down to Cedric really having the sole vote to vote out. And his big thing was he would keep Sai over Kyle, over Justin, over Justin, if Mary and Say could agree to get along. They said that, blah, 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 blah. So they get back to camp, and it's actually kind of interesting because they do, in a sense, kind of like hash out the issues and kind of, for better or worse, kind of promise each other to like let this go for now.
Right. Well, and Cedric, I think he seems to think that him and Say have a good bond still. Say, on the other hand, she's like, me and Mary, you and me, let's go, girls.
She's ready to.
It was a guy's tribe, but now it's just we're the reigning. And I like to see that form, but then of course we got them ripped away instantly. I wish we would have had at least maybe an episode to see how they really got along. Yeah.
I hope to see that they both make it to the merge, and it would be interesting to see in a large group of kind of mix of everyone how that dynamic would work out.
Yeah, they formed their bond there before they swapped.
Yeah.
And if they both made it to merge, then they could come back and reunite and be like, okay, here's what I learned from here. Here's what I learned from here.
See, that's what I'm like interested to see the true test of their relationship. So, as we've been teasing, once they get to the immunity challenge, it is the infamous tribe swap. So here's where we end up. The new Siva tribe is Chrissy, Mitch, Cedric, Say, and Bianca. The new Vula tribe or green tribe is Joe, Shaheen, Thomas, Kyle, and Camilla. So what's interesting about that is you have the 3 California girls, the 3 guys from the former purple, and then Kyle and Camilla, who are a power duo on orange. And then finally we have the Loggy tribe or purple, which is David, Eva, Charity, Star, and Mary.
Interesting.
These shakeups are very interesting. Yeah, so you basically got David and all the girls, which that's a very interesting tribe dynamic.
Absolutely.
Then, like I said, you got the California girls versus that very strong duo. And then you've got this interesting tribe of, Cedric and Say just kind of had this, well, one-sided falling out on Say's side. And then Mitch and Chrissy are not really sure how they feel about each other. Like, I feel like it's kind of up and down.
Well, Chrissy's like, Mitch never even talked to me on the old tribe.
Yeah, his allegiance was stronger to some other folks. And then you have Bianca, who's the lone wolf from the former Loggy tribe.
And
so it's very interesting.
And she's keeping a secret, but she doesn't have her vote right now.
Yeah,
too.
So it's very interesting shakeup here. Okay, so here is what's interesting. So they find out about this. Then they go back to their camps.
Which I thought was interesting. I thought they would do a challenge, or at least a reward challenge right off the bat.
I said immunity challenge, but yes, it was actually just a tribe swap. Okay, so then I'll go back to their individual camps. And one of my favorite things about a Survivor tribe swap is everyone chooses to treat it so vastly different. And that was so true for the way that they all went back to camp and the way they chose to do information. So I want to start with, let's see, it would be the Vula Green tribe. Okay, so here's what's interesting. You have these 5, is it 5, right? Yes, 5 tribe mates. None of them have ever been to tribal so far. Also, they arrive on the green Forma Vula camp, which they had won nothing. So their camp was so scarce that they basically had to start from the ground up. But what was also interesting is this dynamic of the 3 versus 2, because the 3 guys basically think they have this locked in. Whereas we are getting a Survivor a masterclass in strategy because Kyle and Camilla are doing laps around these 3
Oh,
men.
absolutely.
I mean, if you're talking about like how to overcome being in the minority on a tribe, this is the way to do it. They kind of formulate this plan without even really super talking about it with each other. To basically make it seem as if they were enemies or not even enemies, just like not really aligned on the former tribe.
Throwing each other under the bus each chance they got to pretend like they weren't aligned. Which was smart. Honestly, it'd be interesting to see how those 2, Kyle and Camilla and Mary, got along together. Because, Mary did that master acting before tribal the other day, too.
Yeah, so I would be very interested to see how that would happen. What's interesting, too, is we think about the differing advantages from how it's been the past few weeks now come into play as well. So you've got Kyle and Camilla have got an extra vote and an idol, and then Thomas has an extra vote as well. So you're like, how's that going to come into play? It's interesting.
Well, and then Camilla is also, she's working hard because she's like, hey, Star told me this about the journey, and is trying to get them to figure out that Thomas didn't walk away with from that journey because he couldn't.
Trying to find a crack within the men. Yes. So that was really interesting. I kind of teased this a second ago, but this Loggy dynamic was really fascinating because it's David, who was the one we talked about either last episode before, is the one who's the stuntman, but it's kind of having some financial issues, and there's a lot of backstory on that, and then the 4 other women. What was so interesting about this is, as a sole male on the tribe, there's a lot of different ways you could tackle this, but he fully embraced it. He was like, this is actually a comfort zone for me. I grew up with sisters. This is really easy for me. And it's funny because you see half the women are kind of like, yes, we love that he's like enjoying working with us, and half the women are like, yeah, if we go to tribal, he'll be the first out, and we're gonna make this all female, which was interesting.
Well, and Eva, she had that connection with Joe, and she was really scared to lose that when they tribe swapped, but then she formed a pretty quick connection with David.
With David, yeah.
And she's like, I don't really want to work with the other girls. I want to work with you.
Yes.
And I will say, we talked about David before. When we first met him, I thought he was going to be this egotistical, stereotypical, buff jock kind of. But as we've learned more about him, I like him a lot more.
Yeah.
I will say, we even talked about it. He mentioned in this episode that before they went and filmed Survivor, his girlfriend broke up with him.
Which is so messy and confusing from the viewer perspective, because if you remember from the last episode of that, one of the last episodes, whatever it was, he has this whole moment where he's talking about the financial struggles and how his girlfriend won't marry him unless she gets his stuff together. So I'm like, wait a minute. So we went from, you want to propose to her in the last episode, to now she's your ex-girlfriend? I'm like, what is the situation?
He still says if he wins the money, he's going to propose. I'm like, if she broke up with you because of money, first of all, that's not real love right there. Second of all, why would you want to marry somebody who's just wants you if you have money?
Yeah.
It's
really
messy.
It made no sense to me. And so I don't know. It's just very interesting though to see how all this pans out. And then you do have Charity that kind of thinks that like David's controlling in a way. So I thought that was interesting.
She thinks she's controlling David.
Oh, she thinks she's controlling
David. She's like, if I tell David to do something, he's gonna do it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't really like Charity like that.
Yeah. Well, that's what's interesting is someone else kind of had an interesting take on her. I don't remember, but someone else was like, I don't really like her. And I'm like, interesting. Is she not as well liked as we thought? So I don't know. And then of course, Eva's wanted Star out from like the first or second episode because she was told that Star didn't include her in information that she had, and so
Star's an interesting one, honestly.
Yeah. So. And then as we said, Sadie doesn't trust Cedric, so there's that as well. Okay, let's get into the immunity challenge. Here's what was fascinating. We get there, all 3 tribes arrive, and you have the green tribe, the 3 guys, and then the power duo. They walk in. They are confident.
They're
They've
hooting
got
and
their
hollering.
poker face. They're hooting and hollering. They're like, we're going to win. We're going to take this down. Jeff's like, I appreciate the confidence.
I loved the confidence. I believed him.
Yeah, it was a little bit wild to me. But anyway, good for them. So we get to the immunity challenge, and I love the big challenges like this. Explain to me what happens.
So they start off, they have to roll this gigantic cube made out of, I don't know, pipes or something. And then they have to get down, dig up some sandbags, carry their sandbags over, and then do this big block temple puzzle that looks like it wouldn't be too hard, but it's a lot harder than they would think because Vula thinks they've got it done, the green team, and then it's like, nope, they've got something wrong.
Yeah.
In the end, I would say for the most part, it's pretty close. Lockie had a struggle at the beginning.
It was really close, I thought, until like pretty much the end, which was fascinating because
the puzzle.
You didn't really know who was going to, like the placements kept changing.
Yeah. In this season, it feels like the puzzles have been the great,
the great equalizer.
Great equalizer, yes. But in the end, Loggy made that comeback, and so they're still undefeated, even though they have a different team, tribe altogether. And then sadly, poor Vulu lost again with new members.
Yeah, I think the green tribe is tainted.
I do too.
So if you go on Survivor and you get your green buff, you might as well just take your things and go home.
But it's not always green because it's been yellow, it's been purple. It really just, if you start off going to tribal lately, you're going to tribal.
I feel like though in the new era, it's been green the majority of the times. And so I'm just saying, avoid that green color. Okay, here's what's interesting though. So now you've got the Vula tribe, which is the 3 guys, the power duo, like we've been saying. They've never been to tribal. They're all going to tribal now.
Yep.
And we are in real time going to see how this 3-on-2 kind of this power play works out. So they get back to camp. There's, of course, 1,001 one-on-one conversations between the guys and then Camilla and how this is all going to work out. Okay, so Kyle and Camilla stick with the shtick of throwing each other under the bus the entire time. And here's what's interesting. Camilla is playing such a great acting job in this whole thing that at camp, while Kyle is away from his bag, they literally go through his bag to look for an idol.
I was shocked.
And Camilla sits there stone cold faced. And I was impressed because I'm like, even though if I'm Camilla, even though I'm acting to these other guys that I have no real alliance to him, I would be freaking out.
Oh, right.
Because their whole plan is to play the idol on Kyle, and then they vote out one of the guys, and hopefully that will work.
Yeah. I was shocked that they actually did it right in front of Camilla. I mean, even if they thought that they weren't on equal terms, you would still think that maybe there would be a little bit of loyalty.
Yeah.
And I mean, Kyle was like, oh my gosh, did they find my advantage? But apparently it was in his shoe, and they didn't check the shoe.
I was going to say, minor spoiler alert, if you're going to go on Survivor and you're going to go digging through someone's bag, make sure you check everywhere because Shaheen did not do a very good job. Let's just say that.
I mean, personally, if I had an advantage or idol, I would never keep that off my person because you never know what anybody's going to do. So
it was interesting because we talked about this before, how like in Survivor, there's really no rule on like whether you can search through someone's bag or not. Like it's not against anything. And it's funny because I finally listened to the On Fire podcast I mentioned last week, the official Survivor podcast, and Rachel is the player kind of host this season, the former winner from last year. And she was saying that it's interesting this whole process of searching through a bag as a player because in the real world, if you were to go through someone's like purse or backpack, that's a complete invasion of privacy and it would cause a lot of issues. But in Survivor, it's really like no holds barred. Like you can do whatever you want and no one's going to stop you. And I was like, that is really interesting how we like relate those. I don't know. It's interesting how they are comparable, but also not. Okay, so we go to tribal council. And here's what happens, okay? I absolutely loved this. So all three guys, the Cali Girls Alliance, all put the vote on Kyle.
Which isn't surprising, I feel like.
No, not surprising. So the votes come out, whatever. Well, before the votes come out, I should say, Kyle uses the hidden immunity idol. So you're like, thank God he used it.
I didn't realize he had the advantage. Camilla's had the idol, and she gave it to him.
Yes.
Which I was like, wow, they're really sticking with it.
Well, but they worked on the idol together. Remember?
That's
like
true.
That
yeah, that's right.
They because it was that weird puzzle they had to figure out. So he uses it. So now all the votes that are on Kyle are negated because that's how that works. And so now there's two votes on Thomas, which was interesting. Now, so Thomas goes home. I will say, though, there's something in the editing that's fooling me because the editing made us think one thing, and then I read in some articles something else. So I'm curious to see if we find this out on the brand new episode. But supposedly the extra vote was used, and we just didn't see it. And I don't know why that is. So everyone thinks that, because a lot of people thought that after, now the hidden immunity idol's out, but at least Kyle and Camilla still have this extra vote. But supposedly they used it. I don't know how that worked. Hopefully they will show us, just like we didn't know about that Camilla Star conversation at the challenge. But it's really interesting. I've seen this in like 1,000 different places. I don't understand.
I don't understand the purpose of leaving that out of the edit, though.
I know. I don't know either. This is why the whole extra vote thing really is just so confusing. They should just stop it. But either way, okay, so Thomas goes home in a shock. And here's what I love about this. One, Kyle and Camilla just pulled off an epic move, and now the guys obviously know they're working together. Yeah. Secondly, though, Thomas really was a big threat. I mean, he was a very big personality, no lack of confidence on his former tribe and even on this tribe. He had the extra vote. That went home in his pocket.
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting to see this heavy hitter come out. Here's what else is interesting about this, is now, depending on how long we stay in these current tribes, Camilla and Kyle have the option to keep splitting up these men. They could pick up Shaheen or Joe and then ditch the other one in the process.
Yeah.
And that's what's really interesting about the way these dynamics work, is if you can find that crack, you can keep finding the cracks. That doesn't stop.
Or will Shaheen and Joe pull one of them and turn them against each other?
I don't know. I personally feel like Camilla and Kyle are stronger than those two men because those two men weren't necessarily the close ones, I would say.
Yeah.
I would say Joe was closer with like Thomas and then like Eva.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And that's what's crazy is you think about like if we get to the merge, what would the numbers look like, right? Like with the current standing.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well that formal purple tribe, you could still find so many cracks because Joe and Eva are close and Joe and Shaheen are working together right now, but Star and Eva don't like each other.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, if you could get Shaheen and Joe to split too, you got multiple cracks there and you can completely split up that tribe.
That's true. Yeah.
So I don't know. I will say there is this really interesting teaser, for lack of better phrasing, for the new episode, which all we see is we hear kind of audio of something happening that really just completely stops the challenge, the immunity challenge. And Jeff is even shown crying, which I guess has only maybe ever happened one other time on the show. I read this somewhere. So I'm very interested to see what this is. There's a lot of speculation on what it could be, but supposedly whatever happens has potentially never happened on Survivor before.
Interesting.
And so I'm really interested to see. A lot of people speculate that this could be something with Eva. We know that she's talked about a lot of different things that she battles on the daily, and how that could be affected by playing the game of Survivor. We also know that Joe and her are very close, and a lot of people, because like I said, I've always said this about these 2 shows we review, there are people out there that have a lot more time than I do in the day to look at this kind of thing. But people have suspected that it's something to do with Eva, and the voice yelling, "Are you okay?" or whatever it is, sounds like Joe, so people think it's something with Eva, and Joe's checking on her. There's speculation it could be a panic attack. I don't know. I don't want to say too much because if it's not that, I would hate to put that on Eva. But we'll see what happens. Brand new episode, Wednesday, CBS, Survivor. Do not miss it.